In the depths of space, a desperate message echoes through the cosmos, a cry for help that reverberates across the stars. The Zealothi, fleeing from a relentless force known only as the Harvest, send their plea to Earth, an unlikely sanctuary. But when they arrive, bringing advanced technology and promises of peace, Earth's leaders soon realize the true cost of their compassion. The Harvest isn't just a threat, it's a predator that devours entire worlds. And now, Earth is in its sights. What began as an act of mercy quickly turns into a test of humanity's very survival. Will Earth bow to the Harvest's demands? Or will they prove that even the most advanced predators can be stopped by the fierce spirit of humanity? The desperate message DR. Sarah Chun had been staring at the quantum entanglement communication array for 3 straight hours, but the readings made no sense. The massive facility, buried beneath the mountains of New Zealand, hummed with energy as signals from deep space poured through instruments that most people couldn't even pronounce. Sarah was one of only 12 humans who understood how the alien technology worked, and right now, she wished she didn't. The signal patterns dancing across her screens weren't natural. They carried the mathematical precision of intelligence, but underneath that precision lay something else entirely. Fear, desperation, the kind of raw emotion that transcended species barriers and spoke directly to the survival instincts that every living being possessed. Sarah's colleague, Dr. James Morrison, approached her workstation with 2 cups of coffee and a concerned expression. He had been monitoring the deep space arrays for 15 years, but he had never seen Sarah look so troubled by a signal before. The coffee was hot and bitter, exactly how Sarah liked it when she was working through a difficult problem. "Talk to me, Sarah," James said, settling into the chair beside her. "What's got you so spooked? Is it another one of those military tests from the Mars colonies?" Sarah shook her head and pointed at the complex waveforms flowing across her primary display. The patterns were unlike anything in Earth's databases of known communication protocols. They carried layers of meaning that seemed to shift and change as she watched them, like looking at a hologram from different angles. "This isn't from Mars, James. It's not from anywhere in our solar system. The quantum signature suggests the source is at least 40 light-years away, but the signal is arriving in real time. Someone out there has mastered instantaneous communication across galactic distances." James leaned closer to examine the data streams. His background was in theoretical physics rather than xenolinguistics, but he understood the implications of what Sarah was describing. Instantaneous communication across such distances required a level of technological sophistication that humanity was still centuries away from achieving. "Are you saying this is first contact?" he asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Are we looking at proof that we're not alone?" Sarah nodded slowly, her fingers dancing across the control interface as she isolated different components of the signal. The mathematical foundations were elegant beyond anything human science had produced, but the emotional undertones were unmistakably universal. Fear, hope, and desperate pleading transcended cultural boundaries. "It's more than that, James. They're asking for help. Look at these recurring patterns here and here. Their coordinates, star maps, population numbers. Someone is telling us about their world, their people, and the danger they're facing." The main display shifted to show a 3-dimensional star map that materialized in the air above their workstation. Points of light appeared and disappeared, tracing paths through space that led toward Earth's solar system. The message was clear, even without translation. "We are coming to you." Sarah spent the next 6 hours breaking down the signal into its component parts. The aliens called themselves the Zealothi, and they were refugees fleeing from something they referred to only as the Harvest. Their message painted a picture of a nomadic species that had been running for generations, always staying one step ahead of an unstoppable force that consumed entire worlds. The Zealothi had been monitoring Earth's radio signals for decades, learning human languages and studying human culture. They knew about humanity's capacity for both violence and compassion, and they were betting everything on the latter. Their message was a formal request for sanctuary, complete with offers of technological exchange and cultural sharing. Dr. Chen's translation, work, caught the attention of the Global Defense Council within hours. Admiral Marcus Rivera, Earth's highest-ranking military officer, arrived at the facility with a full security detail and authorization to classify the entire project at the highest levels. Sarah had expected this response, but she wasn't prepared for the intensity of the military interest. Dr. Chun, Admiral Rivera said, his voice carrying the weight of authority earned through decades of service. "I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with here. Are these aliens a threat to Earth's security?" Sarah pulled up her analysis files and began explaining the situation. The Zealothi weren't invaders or conquerors. They were survivors, the last remnants of a once great civilization that had been hunted across the galaxy by something called the Harvest. Their technology was clearly advanced, but their intentions appeared benevolent. "They're offering us their knowledge in exchange for sanctuary," Sarah explained. "Medical technology, energy systems, space travel capabilities that are centuries ahead of our current level. But they're also warning us about the Harvest. According to their records, it's some kind of force that follows them from world to world, consuming everything in its path." Admiral Rivera studied the star maps and population data with the analytical mind of a career strategist. The Zealothi claims were either the greatest opportunity in human history or the most elaborate trap ever conceived. Either way, Earth needed to be prepared for both possibilities. "How many refugees are we talking about?" he asked. "Approximately 50,000 individuals aboard 3 ships. They're requesting permission to establish a temporary settlement while their leaders negotiate with Earth's governments for permanent asylum." The Admiral's expression remained neutral, but Sarah could see the wheels turning behind his eyes. 50,000 aliens arriving at Earth would change everything. The political implications alone would reshape global society, regardless of their intentions. Within days, the decision was made at the highest levels of government. Earth would offer sanctuary to the Zealothi refugees. The humanitarian implications were clear, and the technological benefits were too significant to ignore. Preparations began immediately for the first official contact between humanity and an alien species. The Zealothi ships arrived 3 weeks later, emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system with technology that defied human understanding. Their vessels were beautiful works of art as much as they were transportation, flowing organic shapes that seemed to grow rather than being built. They moved through space with grace and purpose, heading directly for Earth's designated sanctuary coordinates. The Dr. Chun was part of the first contact team that met the Zealothi delegation at the lunar reception facility. The aliens were humanoid, but clearly evolved under different conditions than humans. They were tall and elegant, with elongated limbs and features that suggested a lighter gravity environment. Their skin had a subtle luminescence that shifted colors with their emotions, and their eyes held an ancient sadness that spoke of loss beyond human comprehension. Ambassador Kethera, the Zealothi leader, communicated through a combination of telepathic impressions and carefully learned human languages. Her mental touch was gentle but powerful, carrying emotions and concepts that words couldn't fully express. She spoke of gratitude for human compassion and hope for a future free from the Harvest. "Your species possesses something rare in the galaxy," Ambassador Kethera explained to the assembled human delegation. "You have the capacity for both fierce protection and gentle nurturing. We have traveled far seeking a world that could understand our plight and offer genuine sanctuary." The Zealothi brought gifts that revolutionized human understanding of physics, medicine, and engineering. Their fusion technology was clean and efficient. Their medical knowledge eliminated diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia, and their space travel capabilities opened the galaxy to human exploration. In return, humans offered them a new home and protection from whatever had been hunting them. But as the weeks passed, subtle signs began to emerge that the relationship wasn't as equal as it first appeared. The Zealothi, while grateful, seemed to view humans as primitive but well-meaning caretakers rather than equals. They appreciated human compassion but questioned human capability. Their technology came with restrictions and limitations that suggested they didn't fully trust their benefactors, the Doctor. Chun noticed these patterns during her daily interactions with Zealothy scientists and cultural liaisons. They were polite and respectful, but there was an underlying assumption that humans were too simple to understand the complexities of galactic civilization. The Zealothy saw Earth as a safe haven rather than a partner in their struggle against the Harvest. The illusion of partnership shattered when long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures approaching the solar system. The Harvest had found them. Ships the size of small moons were converging on Earth's location, their biomechanical hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets. The Zealothy had led their greatest enemy directly to humanity's doorstep. Ambassador Cathera's emergency briefing to the Global Defense Council was a study in barely controlled panic. The Harvest wasn't just a military force. It was a galactic phenomenon that had been consuming civilizations for thousands of years. They turned conquered worlds into resource extraction sites and enslaved populations into their collective consciousness. No species had ever successfully resisted them. "We are sorry," Cathera said, her telepathic voice heavy with guilt and resignation. "We hoped that Earth's isolation would protect us all, but the Harvest is relentless. They have followed us here, and now your world is in danger because of our presence." The Zealothy leaders suggested that the best course of action would be for Earth to surrender them to the Harvest. It was a terrible sacrifice, but it might satisfy the cosmic predators and save humanity from total annihilation. They had seen this scenario play out dozens of times on dozens of worlds. The pattern was always the same: shelter the refugees, face the Harvest, and ultimately choose between survival and morality. Admiral Rivera's response was immediate and unwavering. "We don't abandon our friends to monsters," he declared. "If these Harvest entities want to fight, they'll get one. But they're not taking our guests, and they're not taking our world." The Zealothy were stunned by this response. In their experience, primitive species always chose survival over principle when faced with overwhelming force. They had expected humans to be reasonable, to make the logical choice that would save the greater number of lives. Instead, they were witnessing something unprecedented: a species that refused to compromise their values, even when facing extinction. As the Harvest fleet approached Earth's solar system, humanity began preparing for the greatest challenge in its history. The Zealothy watched in amazement as humans transformed their compassionate society into a unified war machine. Every nation, every military force, every resource was dedicated to a single purpose: protecting Earth and its inhabitants from an enemy that had never been defeated. Dr. Chin worked around the clock to understand Harvest technology and communication protocols. If humanity was going to fight an enemy that had conquered the galaxy, they needed every advantage they could get. The Zealothy provided what intelligence they could, but their knowledge was limited to running and hiding rather than fighting and winning. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine not just the fate of Earth, but the future of freedom in the galaxy. The Harvest had encountered countless species over the millennia, but they had never faced anything like humanity. They were about to learn that some prey fought back, and some worlds were more dangerous than they appeared. The Harvest descends. The Harvest fleet materialized at the edge of Earth's solar system like a nightmare made manifest. Admiral Marcus Rivera stood in the command center of the United Earth Defense Station, watching through telescopic displays as ships the size of asteroids emerged from hyperspace. Each vessel was a grotesque fusion of organic and mechanical components, their hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that suggested they were more alive than built. "My God," whispered Commander Elena Vasquez, Rivera's tactical officer. "How many ships are we looking at?" 47 primary vessels, sir," reported Lieutenant Chun from the sensor station. "Each one is roughly the size of Manhattan. They're accompanied by what appears to be several thousand smaller craft, probably fighters or support vessels." Rivera nodded grimly. The Zealothy had warned them about the Harvest's overwhelming numbers, but seeing the fleet with their own eyes drove home the magnitude of the threat they were facing. Humanity had never assembled a military force capable of engaging even a single ship of that size, let alone an entire armada. Ambassador Kether materialized beside Rivera's command chair, her holographic form flickering with stress-induced color changes. The Zealoty leader had been monitoring the Harvest's approach with growing desperation, and her emotional state was affecting her ability to maintain stable communication links. "Admiral Rivera," she said, her telepathic voice carrying undertones of ancient fear, "you must understand the futility of resistance. The Harvest has consumed over 300 worlds in the past millennium. They have perfected the art of conquest through overwhelming force and psychological manipulation. No species has ever successfully opposed them." Rivera studied the tactical displays showing the Harvest formation. The alien ships were moving in perfect coordination, their approach vector calculated to maximize intimidation while minimizing their own risk. It was the behavior of predators who had never encountered serious resistance. "Ambassador," Rivera replied, "humanity has a long history of doing things that everyone said were impossible. We've survived ice ages, plagues, natural disasters, and wars that should have destroyed us. We're still here because we don't give up even when the odds are against us." The Harvest fleet began broadcasting on all frequencies as they entered the outer solar system. The message was transmitted in hundreds of languages, including human languages they had learned by monitoring Earth's communications for decades. The voice that delivered their ultimatum was cold and mechanical, devoid of emotion or compassion. "Inhabitants of the third planet," the message began, "you harbor fugitives who belong to the Harvest. The Zealoty refugees in your custody are property of the collective consciousness and must be returned immediately. Your species will be given the opportunity to serve as tributaries in exchange for your planet's continued existence. Compliance will be rewarded with technological advancement and protection from galactic threats. Resistance will result in total biological absorption and planetary resource extraction." The message continued for several minutes, detailing the terms of surrender and the consequences of defiance. The Harvest offered humanity a choice: become willing servants and live under alien rule, or face complete annihilation. There was no third option in their experience because no species had ever created one. Dr. Sarah Chun had been analyzing Harvest communication protocols and technology signatures since their arrival. Her linguistic expertise, combined with intelligence provided by the Zealoty, had given her insights into how the Harvest operated. What she discovered was both terrifying and revealing. "Admiral," she reported over the command channel, "I've been studying their tactical patterns and communication structures. The Harvest operates like a cosmic swarm intelligence. Individual ships have limited autonomous decision-making capability, but they're incredibly effective at following predetermined protocols." Rivera understood the implications immediately. They're not expecting us to deviate from their script. They've done this so many times that they assume every species will respond the same way. "Exactly," Sarah confirmed. "According to Zealoty records, most civilizations either surrender immediately or put up token resistance before accepting tributary status. The Harvest has optimized their approach for those two scenarios." Commander Vasquez leaned over the tactical display, studying the Harvest's formation. "What happens if we don't follow their script? What if we do something they're not prepared for?" Sarah's analysis suggested that the Harvest's greatest strength might also be their greatest weakness. Their collective consciousness was incredibly efficient at processing known variables, but it struggled with unprecedented situations. They had become so accustomed to easy victories that they had never developed contingency plans for serious resistance. The Global Defense Council convened an emergency session to formulate humanity's response to the Harvest's ultimatum. Representatives from every major nation participated in the decision-making process, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Humanity's answer would be delivered by Admiral Rivera on behalf of the entire species. "This is Admiral Marcus Rivera, speaking for the United Earth Defense Force," Rivera announced on all frequencies. "We have received your ultimatum and considered your terms. Here is our response. We reject your demands. We will not surrender our guests to you, and we will not become your servants. If you want to fight, you'll get one. But you're not taking our world, and you're not taking our people. The silence that followed Rivera's declaration lasted for exactly 17 minutes. During that time, the Harvest fleet continued its approach while their collective consciousness processed this unprecedented response. No species had ever rejected their ultimatum so completely. Most civilizations begged for mercy or tried to negotiate better terms. None had ever declared war on the Harvest. When the Harvest finally responded, their message carried undertones of confusion and irritation. Species designation: human. Your response indicates either technological incapacity for understanding or genetic deficiency in survival instincts. The Harvest does not engage in combat with tributary species. We consume them. Your resistance is not logical. You will be absorbed along with your planet's resources. What the Harvest failed to understand was that humanity's response wasn't based on logic or calculation. It was based on principles that had been forged in the crucible of Earth's harsh environment over millions of years of evolution. Humans were not just intelligent tool users. They were evolved survivors who had learned to fight for their lives against overwhelming odds. Dr. Chin made a disturbing discovery while analyzing the Harvest's recent communications. Hidden within their standard diplomatic protocols were references to something called sanctuary protocols and bait species. The implications were horrifying but undeniable. The Zealoty had been using Earth as bait to lure the Harvest into a trap. Admiral, she reported with barely controlled anger, I need to show you something. The Zealoty didn't just stumble onto Earth by accident. They've been studying us for decades, evaluating our capacity for both compassion and violence. They deliberately chose Earth as their sanctuary because they knew we would protect them. Rivera's expression darkened as he read Sarah's analysis. The Zealoty had fled from world to world, using each sanctuary species as a shield against the Harvest. When their protectors inevitably fell, the Zealoty would escape to find new hosts. They had never intended to make a permanent home on Earth. They had planned to use humanity as cannon fodder in their eternal flight from the Harvest. Ambassador Kethera's holographic form flickered with shame and desperation when confronted with the evidence. Admiral Rivera, you must understand our position. We are a peaceful species. We have no capacity for violence or warfare. We can only survive by finding others willing to protect us. We hoped that Earth's isolation would be enough, but the Harvest found us anyway. You used us, Rivera said, quietly. You knew this would happen, and you used us anyway. We had no choice, Kethera replied. The Harvest is inevitable. We can only delay them, not stop them. At least your species will have a quick death rather than slow absorption. We have seen both fates, and death is preferable. Rivera turned away from the Zealoty ambassador and focused on the tactical displays. The Harvest fleet was now within the orbit of Pluto, their massive ships casting shadows across the outer planets. Earth's defensive forces were pitifully small by comparison, but they were about to demonstrate something that the Harvest had never encountered, a species that refused to be victims. All units, Rivera announced over the command network. This is Admiral Rivera. We know the odds. We know what we're facing. But we also know who we are. We are the species that survived the ice ages, conquered the plagues, and built civilization on a world that tried to kill us every day. We are the descendants of hunters who brought down creatures 10 times our size with nothing but sticks and stones. Today, we show the galaxy that some prey fights back. The Harvest began their standard conquest protocol as their fleet entered the inner solar system. They expected to encounter desperate defensive positions around Earth's major population centers, followed by increasingly frantic attempts at negotiation as human resistance collapsed. Instead, they found something that violated every assumption in their tactical databases. Earth's defensive positions were not clustered around major cities or strategic resources. They were scattered throughout the solar system in seemingly random patterns that made no tactical sense. Human ships were hiding in asteroid fields behind planetary rings and in the shadow of moons. Rather than concentrating their forces for a decisive battle, Humans had deployed them for asymmetric warfare. Unknown tactical configuration reported the lead harvest ship to the collective consciousness. Enemy forces are not positioned for territorial defense. Pattern suggests harassment rather than confrontation. Request guidance for non-standard engagement scenarios. The Harvest Collective had no experience with species that chose guerrilla warfare over conventional battle. Their tactical algorithms were optimized for overwhelming static defenses and breaking the will of civilized opponents. They had never faced an enemy that refused to play by the rules of civilized warfare. Commander Vasquez launched the first human attack from her position behind Europa's ice sheet. Her squadron of modified fighters accelerated toward the nearest harvest vessel, their engines running silent until the last possible moment. The attack was not designed to destroy the alien ship, but to gather intelligence and test their defenses. The harvest vessel's response was swift but predictable. They deployed energy shields and returned fire with weapons designed to disable rather than destroy. Their protocols called for capturing enemy forces whenever possible for later absorption into the collective consciousness. They had never encountered a species that expected to be captured and had planned accordingly that Vasquez's fighters release their payloads just before the harvest weapons reached them. Instead of explosive warheads, the missiles contained advanced sensor packages and communication relays. As the human ships were destroyed by harvest weapons, their final transmissions uploaded detailed scans of alien technology and tactical responses to Earth's command centers. Data package received, reported Lieutenant Chun. We have detailed scans of their shield frequencies, weapon signatures, and hull composition. They're using biological components that respond to electromagnetic interference. Dr. Chen analyzed the sensor data with growing excitement. The Harvest's biomechanical technology was incredibly advanced, but it was also vulnerable to attacks that no civilized species would consider. Their organic components could be disrupted by biological weapons, and their mechanical systems could be hacked using quantum viruses. Admiral, she announced, I think I know how to hurt them. Their technology is based on symbiotic relationships between organic and mechanical components. If we can disrupt those relationships, we can cause cascading system failures throughout their ships. Rivera smiled grimly as he studied the tactical possibilities. The Harvest had designed their technology to be invulnerable to conventional weapons and energy-based attacks. They had never considered that their enemies might use biological warfare against biomechanical systems. Prepare the special weapons, Rivera ordered. It's time to show the Harvest what happens when they try to hunt on a death world. The Harvest collective consciousness began to register anomalies in their tactical projections as human resistance continued to deviate from established patterns. Their ships were taking damage from weapons that shouldn't exist, and their absorption protocols were failing because humans refused to be absorbed. Something was fundamentally wrong with their understanding of the species. That 8S, the Harvest fleet, approached Earth's orbital defenses. They were about to discover that they had made a critical error in their assessment of humanity. They had seen humans as primitive but compassionate caretakers, suitable for tributary status but incapable of serious resistance. They were about to learn that compassion and lethality were not mutually exclusive traits, and that Earth's harsh environment had produced the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. Deathworld Fury Colonel Ana Vasquez had been born in the Amazon rainforest, where every day was a struggle against an environment that actively tried to kill everything living within it. Her childhood had been spent learning to identify which plants were poisonous, which animals were predators, and which sounds meant immediate danger. That education was about to prove invaluable as she led the first ground assault against a Harvest landing force. The Harvest had made their first tactical error by attempting to establish a beachhead on Earth's surface. Their strategy had worked perfectly on dozens of other worlds, where civilized species fought from prepared positions and followed predictable military doctrines. They had never encountered a species that treated their own planet as a weapon. Remember, Vasquez told her team over the communication network, "We're not trying to win a conventional battle. We're trying to teach them that this planet bites back. Every tree, every rock, every stream in this jungle is our ally. Use everything Earth gives us. The Harvest landing craft settled into a clearing in the Brazilian rainforest, their biomechanical hulls extending tendrils into the soil to begin the resource extraction process. The aliens who emerged from the ships were grotesque hybrids of organic and mechanical components, their bodies adapted for consuming and processing biological matter. They moved with efficient precision, establishing a perimeter while their ships began converting local flora into raw materials. What the Harvest didn't understand was that the Amazon rainforest was not just a collection of plants and animals. It was a living ecosystem that had evolved over millions of years to be incredibly resilient and adaptable. When foreign organisms attempted to consume it, the forest fought back with toxins, parasites, and predators that no galactic database had ever cataloged. That Vasquez's team had spent weeks preparing the jungle for this moment. They had cultivated the most aggressive plant species, bred the deadliest insects, and identified the most virulent microorganisms. When the Harvest began their extraction process, they were not just consuming Earth's resources. They were ingesting a cocktail of biological weapons that had been refined by evolution itself. The first Harvest organisms to show signs of distress were the extraction drones. Their biomechanical systems began malfunctioning as Earth's microorganisms invaded their organic components. Fungi began growing through their mechanical joints, bacteria corrupted their data processing centers, and viruses rewrote their genetic programming. The jungle was literally eating them from the inside out. Target the processing centers, Vasquez commanded as her team moved through the canopy like the predators they had evolved to be. Don't give them time to adapt to our countermeasures. The human soldiers moved with the fluid grace of apex predators, using the jungle's natural camouflage to approach their targets undetected. They had abandoned conventional weapons in favor of tools that worked with Earth's environment rather than against it. Their ammunition was laced with engineered bacteria. Their explosives were biological agents that turned the Harvest's own systems against them. Meanwhile, Admiral Rivera coordinated the space-based assault from his command center. The Harvest fleet was discovering that Earth's orbital defenses were not limited to traditional weapons platforms. Humanity had turned their entire solar system into a battlefield, using everything from asteroid mining charges to solar collection arrays as weapons against the invaders. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Chen, "we're getting reports from all fronts. The biological weapons are working better than expected. Harvest ships are experiencing cascading system failures as their organic components are compromised by Earth's microorganisms." Dr. Sarah Chun had been working with teams of biologists and engineers to weaponize Earth's most aggressive life forms. They had created viral packages that could rewrite Harvest genetic code, bacterial colonies that could consume biomechanical interfaces, and fungal networks that could hijack alien communication systems. The planet itself was becoming humanity's greatest weapon. The Harvest Collective is trying to adapt, Sarah reported, but they're encountering something they've never faced before. Earth's biosphere is too diverse and too aggressive for their systems to process. Every adaptation they make opens them up to new forms of attack. The Harvest had conquered hundreds of worlds, but they had never encountered a planet like Earth. Most worlds in the galaxy were relatively stable environments where life had evolved in predictable patterns. Earth was a death world, a planet where catastrophic events had repeatedly reset the evolutionary clock, creating life forms that were incredibly resilient and adaptable. Captain Lisa Stone commanded a squadron of human ships that had been hiding in the asteroid belt, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Her vessels were not the most advanced in Earth's fleet, but they were crewed by humans who had grown up in the harsh environment of the outer colonies. They understood survival in ways that the Harvest could never comprehend. "All units," Stone announced over the tactical network, "initiate Operation Beehive. Show them what happens when they kick the wrong nest." The human ships emerged from the asteroid field like a swarm of angry insects, their engines running on overload as they accelerated toward the Harvest fleet. Instead of engaging in conventional combat, they began ramming attacks against the alien vessels, their hulls loaded with biological weapons that would spread through the Harvest's interconnected systems. The Harvest collective consciousness was experiencing something unprecedented: confusion. Their tactical algorithms were failing because human behavior did not match any known patterns. Humans were sacrificing their own ships in suicide attacks, using their planet's ecosystem as a weapon, and employing biological warfare against biomechanical systems. None of this made sense according to their understanding of civilized warfare. Unknown variables exceeding processing capacity reported the lead harvest vessel. Enemy species demonstrates characteristics incompatible with standard tributary classifications. Recommend immediate withdrawal and strategic reassessment. But the collective consciousness was not prepared to abandon their conquest. They had invested too many resources in tracking the Zealoty refugees to Earth, and their reputation as an unstoppable force would be damaged if they retreated from a single world. They decided to escalate their assault, deploying weapons that could sterilize entire planets. The Harvest's planet-killer weapons were massive biomechanical constructs that could consume a world's atmosphere and biosphere within days. They had used these weapons to destroy civilizations that proved too troublesome to absorb, leaving behind dead worlds that served as warnings to other species. Earth was about to become their next victim. Dr. Chun detected the planet killers as they deployed from the largest Harvest ships. Her analysis of their function was both terrifying and revealing. The weapons were designed to consume stable ecosystems, breaking down biological matter into basic components that could be absorbed by the Harvest. They had never been tested against a world as chaotic and aggressive as Earth. Admiral, she reported, they're deploying extinction-level weapons. But I think I know how to turn them against the Harvest. These weapons are designed to consume and process biological matter, but they're not equipped to handle Earth's defensive organisms. Rivera authorized the deployment of humanity's most dangerous countermeasure, engineered superorganisms that had been developed in secret biological warfare laboratories. These creatures were hybrids of Earth's most aggressive life forms, designed to consume and convert any biological matter they encountered. They were too dangerous to use under normal circumstances, but Earth was fighting for its survival. The planet-killer weapons began their assault on Earth's biosphere, but instead of consuming a passive ecosystem, they encountered organisms that fought back. The superorganisms infiltrated the Harvest weapons, turning them into breeding grounds for Earth's most aggressive life forms. Within hours, the planet-killers were no longer consuming Earth. They were being consumed by it. Colonel Vasquez watched from the Brazilian rainforest as Harvest ships began falling from the sky like diseased birds. The aliens who had seemed so confident and unstoppable were now fleeing in panic as their own weapons turned against them. The jungle around her was glowing with bioluminescent organisms that had been released by the biological warfare, creating a scene that was both beautiful and terrifying. "This is Vasquez to all units," she announced over the global communication network. "The Harvest is retreating. Their biomechanical systems are failing across the board. Earth's biosphere is rejecting them like a bad organ transplant." The Harvest collective consciousness was experiencing something that had never happened in their long history: total system failure. Their ships were being consumed from within by organisms they couldn't understand or control. Their weapons had been turned against them. Their perfect record of galactic conquest was crumbling as a single Deathworld demonstrated why some planets remained unconquered. Ambassador Kethera materialized in Admiral Rivera's command center, her holographic form flickering with amazement and disbelief. The Zealoty had witnessed the Harvest's defeat of countless civilizations, but they had never seen anything like humanity's response to the invasion. "Admiral Rivera," she said, her telepathic voice carrying wonder and fear in equal measure, "what have you done? The Harvest has never retreated from a conquest. They have never failed to absorb a world they have targeted. Your species has accomplished the impossible." Rivera watched the tactical displays as Harvest ships fled Earth's solar system, their biomechanical hulls compromised by Earth's aggressive organisms. Many of the alien vessels were barely functional, their systems failing as terrestrial life forms continued to spread through their structures like a plague. "We did what we had to do," Rivera replied. We protected our world and our guests. That's what humans do when our backs are against the wall. Dr. Sarah Chun was analyzing the retreating Harvest fleet when she made a discovery that changed everything. The fleeing ships were broadcasting distress signals on frequencies that could be detected across the galaxy. They were warning other Harvest collectives about the Terran problem and advising extreme caution when dealing with Deathworld species. Admiral, she reported with growing excitement, the implications of this victory extend far beyond Earth. The Harvest operates as a galactic network of collective consciousnesses. If word spreads that they were defeated by a single world, it could inspire resistance movements throughout the galaxy. The Zealothi refugees who had sought sanctuary on Earth were witnessing something unprecedented in their species' long history of flight. For the first time in generations, the Harvest had been stopped, not negotiated with, not delayed, but actually defeated by a species they had underestimated. Captain Stone's damaged ship limped back to Earth's orbital facilities, her hull scarred by biomechanical weapons, but her crew intact. She had led the final assault on the Harvest command vessels, using ramming tactics that would have horrified any civilized military observer, but had proven devastatingly effective against an enemy unprepared for such savage determination. "Command, this is Stone," she reported as her ship docked. "The Harvest command structure has completely collapsed. Their collective consciousness appears to be fragmenting as individual ships lose connection with the network. They're fleeing in complete disorder." Colonel Vasquez emerged for the Amazon rainforest to find a transformed landscape. The biological weapons that humanity had unleashed were already being contained by Earth's natural systems, but their effect on the Harvest had been permanent. Crashed alien ships were being consumed by the jungle, their advanced technology becoming nutrients for terrestrial life forms. "This is what happens when you try to harvest a death world," she said to her team as they watched vines growing through the wreckage of a Harvest vessel. "Earth doesn't just fight back. It adapts, it learns, and it makes sure the threat never returns." The global celebration that followed the Harvest retreat was unlike anything in human history. Every nation, every culture, every human settlement throughout the solar system joined together in recognizing what they had accomplished. They had not just survived first contact with a hostile alien species, they had defeated an enemy that had conquered hundreds of worlds. Dr. Chun spent the days following the victory analyzing the data they had gathered about Harvest technology and tactics. Her research revealed patterns that could help other species resist similar attacks in the future. Earth had become more than just another world. It had become a symbol of hope for oppressed civilizations throughout the galaxy. The Harvest's greatest weakness was their inability to adapt to unprecedented situations, she explained to the assembled scientists and military leaders. They had become so successful using the same tactics that they never developed contingencies for species that fought back effectively. The Zealothi began making preparations to leave Earth, but their departure was different from their previous flights from sanctuary worlds. They were not fleeing in panic from an approaching enemy. They were leaving as free beings who had witnessed the impossible. The Harvest would never pursue them again, because the Harvest had learned that some prey was too dangerous to hunt. Ambassador Cathera's final message to humanity was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that the entire galaxy would hear about Earth's victory. Her words would inspire resistance movements on a dozen worlds and encourage species that had accepted tributary status to reconsider their submission. "To the peoples of the galaxy," she announced, "know that the Harvest can be defeated. The humans of Earth have proven that courage, ingenuity, and unity can overcome any threat. The age of unopposed conquest is over. The Deathworlders have shown us that freedom is possible." Admiral Rivera stood on the observation deck of the defense station, looking out at Earth's blue marble hanging in space. The planet looked peaceful from this distance, but he now understood that its beauty concealed the most dangerous biosphere in the galaxy. Earth had evolved apex predators in every environment, and humanity was just the latest and most successful of those predators. "Sir," Lieutenant Chun reported, "we're receiving communication requests from dozens of star systems. Word is spreading about our victory over the harvest. Other species want to know how we did it. Rivera smiled as he considered the implications. Earth had been isolated for its entire history, believing itself to be alone in the universe. Now they were about to become the center of a galactic resistance movement against oppression and conquest. The death world that had forged humanity's strength would become a beacon of hope for the galaxy. The Harvest Collective that had fled Earth's solar system eventually regrouped at a safe distance, but they were forever changed by their encounter with humanity. Their reports to other Harvest fleets carried a new classification for Earth. Extreme hazard, avoid at all costs. The planet that had seemed like easy prey had revealed itself to be the most dangerous world in their databases. As humanity began reaching out to other species in the galaxy, they carried with them the knowledge that had defeated the Harvest. They taught biological warfare to civilizations that had never considered using their own ecosystems as weapons. They shared the tactics of asymmetric warfare with species that had only known conventional combat. They demonstrated that unity and determination could overcome any technological advantage. Earth's victory over the Harvest marked the beginning of a new age in galactic civilization. The universe was no longer divided between predators and prey, conquerors and conquered. There was now a third category, those who fought back. And at the center of this new resistance movement was a small blue planet whose inhabitants had learned to be dangerous by growing up in the most hostile environment imaginable. The Death World had spoken, and the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had proven that compassion and lethality were not contradictory traits, and that the greatest predators in the universe were not the ones with the most advanced technology, but the ones with the strongest will to survive. Earth had become the shield that protected the innocent and the sword that struck down oppressors. The age of the Harvest was over. The age of the Deathworlders had begun.